Hello viewers and welcome to a brand new series of Trashtalk on Fabula Ultima, a series where I talk about the various classes you can mix together to create your desired heroic characters in your Fabula Ultima campaign. I will not just talk about the classes you get from the core rulebook, but also those that came with various Fabula Ultima supplements like the Fantasy Atlases, and also some small bonus zines you could find on Fabula Ultima homepage. Anyway, as the first episode for the series, let's start with the very first one, Arcanist, but before that, let's refresh your mind on how character building works in Fabula Ultima. In Fabula Ultima, your character immediately start at level 5, and could distribute levels to get a skill in a class. You must start with at minimum 2 classes, and 3 max, so you will always be multi-classing in Fabula Ultima. Class in Fabula Ultima isn't really a job, and more a portion of what your character role is like, making it a very flexible system. When you have 10 levels in a class, it is maxed out, you can no longer pick more skill from it, but you could pick a heroic skill for it, enhancing your character in a new way. It can be class-dependent ones, or just general heroic skill with no requirement. When you level up, you can also pick a skill from a new class, as well as earning the class-free benefits and other related class-specific mechanic, but you cannot have more than 3 non-mastered classes at a time. So, for this series, I will be explaining a class in approximately 3 sections, on how their special mechanic works if any, their skills and how it works in combination with other classes, and finally, their class-specific heroic skill. Or at least that's what I was thinking when writing this portion of the script. Anyway, let's actually get to the meat. Avatar, Chosen, Summoner, Arcanist can bring forth a projection of their soul and psyche outward, giving it a physical form. These projections are called Arcana, manifestations of legendary entities of known or unknown past. On some worlds, these might even be worshipped as deities, and those who can bring things out could wield considerate power, literal, societal, or political. In terms of mechanic, Arcanist don't actually literally summon an extra character out. What Arcana do is instead directly projecting benefits to the Arcanist or their allies. This is called merge effect because that's what the Arcanist is doing, merging with their Arcana. And, when the situation calls for it, the Arcanist can dismiss the current Arcana to switch out for another one. Willingly dismissing an Arcana can also give you powerful dismiss effect, but you probably don't want to just randomly do that as the cost to summon an Arcana again is kinda expensive, and now you are just kinda naked without any Arcana benefit. In general, the Arcanist class is mostly here to aid what your characters are actually doing, whether that's throwing magic missile or swinging sharp stick at monsters. Now, let's actually take a look at what being an Arcanist can give you. First, you gain a free benefits to permanently increase your mind points by 5. Mind is basically mana, or essence, or whatever you call the blue juice in your setting. Then you get the skill. If you are wondering how you can get 10 skill levels max out of just 5 skills, some of the skills have this thing here which indicates that you can pick it more than once to upgrade it, mostly just in bigger numbers. Anyway, first skill, Arcane Circle. After you willingly dismiss an arcane on your turn during conflict, if the Arcana has not been summoned in the same turn, and you have an arcane weapon at hand, you may immediately perform a spell for free. In terms of action, you still have to pay the mind point cost. The spell must also be below a certain number. Leveling the skill can increase this limit by 5 per level up to a max of 20 mind points. If you are playing as a spell user, you definitely want this so you can rapidly fire off spell even on turns you shouldn't be able to. If you are playing as someone that beat up people into a pulp, this skill is instead completely useless to you. While Arcanist sounds like a magic class, it does not actually provide any spells for you to use. You have to mix in Chimerist, Elementalist, Entropist, or Spiritist class in the core book to get spells to use. Second skill, Arcane Regeneration. When you summon an Arcana, you immediately recover up to a maximum of 10 hit points. Very basic, you just heal when summoning an Arcana. It's something to help you in a pinch, I suppose. Third skill, and it's only here because the skills are in alphabetical order, Bind and Summon. It's a skill that lets you bind and summon Arcana. You literally need the skill or else the entire Arcanist mechanics will not work. If you take the skill at character creation, you get 1 Arcana at the start, but if you take it later, like your character slowly getting awakened to something from within, you may only obtain new Arcana through exploration and story progression. And yes, if you play as Arcanist, you only gain new Arcana at the mercy of your Game Master. To Game Masters, you probably want to give the Arcanist player a chance to get new Arcana every 5 levels or around there. Also, to summon an Arcana in battle, you need to spend an action and also a huge 40 MP cost. This is just enough that even if you pick the lowest dice, a d6, for your wisdom roll, You can barely skip the minimum requirement even at the start to call out your Arcana, it's just that it's gonna drain all of your MP to do so. Which basically means that, much like most spellcaster classes in JRPG, Arcanist really wants a reliable ways of gaining back MP or reducing MP cost, fast. So naturally, the fourth skill is here for that, Emergency Arcanum. As long as you are in crisis, which is below half health, the cost for summoning your Arcana is reduced by up to 30 MP. This massively decreases the cost of summoning Arcana from basically draining your whole MP bar, to something you can actually do so repeatedly. It makes it so that if the situation has gone bad, you can get a leg up in reversing it. It also pairs well with Arcane Regeneration, as you can heal yourself up by summoning Arcana if your HP gets too low, kinda like getting to switch out in a wrestling match before going right back in. Finally, there's the fifth skill, Ritual Arcanism, which lets you perform rituals of the Arcanism discipline if the effect falls under the domain of one or more Arcana you have bound. Rituals are basically narrative magic power that can be cast by a character to overcome a narrative obstacle. They are very flexible but are costly in MP, as you can make it go all the way up to budget-killing magical spectacle. For Arcanism ritual, you can perform magical effect based on the Arcana you have bound. For example, Arcanum of the Forge has domain of fire, heat, and metal, so you can do things like melting down a metal door with ritual if you have bound with this Arcana. Arcanism ritual also use double willpower for the magic check, to see if you succeed in casting the ritual or not. This, combined with how much summoning can cost, makes Arcanist want to have high willpower, or at least have a D8 in it. Now, if it was most other classes, this would be the part where the episode goes straight to the heroic skill, but the most important part of Arcanist is of course, the Arcana. In core rulebook, there's 9 Arcana, and supposedly, you can create custom Arcana with your GM in your group's custom setting too, but at least try figuring out how these base Arcana work first before doing that. As I have mentioned before, after you summon an Arcana, you get the merge benefits. This stays until you dismiss the Arcana, whether willingly or not. If you willingly dismiss the Arcana, you get the dismiss effect if listed. First, there's Arcanum of the Forge. When merged, you have resistance to fire damage, making you take only half fire damage. Fabula Ultima is pretty much a tabletop JRPG, so elemental damage type is an important aspect of gameplay here. Any fire damage you deal also ignore enemy resistance. Do note that this does not make your weapon or spell do fire damage automatically. You have to actually have something that can set people on fire to take advantage of this. When you dismiss, you have two choices, Forge or Inferno. Forge lets you create a basic armor, shield, or weapon of your choice, and if it's a weapon, it now deals fire damage, and because it's a magical projection, if you pick this option again, the previously created item will vanish. And, I want you to read that line properly, because what this means is that you can just summon the Arcana, dismiss it, and you have a burning sharp stick that will last forever until you pick the Forge option again. This dismiss option eventually becomes obsolete as you can just buy better weapons and armor with cash, but it can be a potent early game option. The other is Inferno, which just sets every enemy on field for 30 fire damage that can ignore resistance, very powerful, and the damage gets higher the more levels you get. Arcanum of the Frost is almost the same as Forge, just for ice power, and also makes you immune to Enraged when merged. Enraged, like all other status effects in Fabula Ultima, decreases your die size for an attribute, and they stacks to a minimum of d6, and the only way to get rid of them is through spells, skills, items, or just resting. Quite annoying. Arcanum of the Gate provides resistance to dark damage instead, as well as granting you +1 to magic defense, quite potent with the low amount of dice number used in Fabula Ultima, and when you dismiss it, you can blast everything with dark damage, or you can choose to just teleport you, your teammates, and then some, out to a location you have visited that is also within one travel day, very useful for escaping from unlikely situation, or just backtracking quickly. Arcanum of the Grimoire is a completely non-combat focused Arcana. You can understand and speak any language, and your insight die size is now one size up, an attribute often used for shooting or using magic, and by dismissing it, you can directly ask the GM a question they must answer, though you can only do this once per day. Arcanum of the Oak is another elemental Arcana, now giving resistance to earth and poison damage as well as immunity to being poisoned, and when you recover HP, you recover 5 more points of it too, good for the tank or fighter of the group. Dismissing it also cure poison status off anyone you desire, and heal them too. Arcanum of the Sky provides resistance to air and bolt damage, as well as letting you spend an action to accurately predict weather for the next day within 2 travel days range. Dismiss effect is just zapping everyone. Arcanum of the Sword instead provides an effect that aids weapon attacker heavily, making them deal more damage and having no type to ignore basically any damage affinities, and you can supercharge the attack for once to hit multiple targets, but this will dismiss the Arcana afterward. Arcanum of the Tower provides resistance of a specific type to all allies on field instead, and dismissing it shoot lasers everywhere. Finally, there's Arcanum of the Will, making you immune to slow, and +1 bonus to defense because you are now faster, and dismissing it makes anything you don't like slower, to the point of basically being frozen if they are slow already. There are also more specialized Arcana that can be found in the 5th Fabula Ultima bonus supplement on Fabula Ultima main website, but using these are much more optional, and it might serve as inspiration for custom Arcana in your campaign. And finally, upon reaching 10 levels in a class, it is now locked out and you can pick a heroic skill, whether for the class or something else. There is 2 Arcanist required heroic skills in the core book, 1 in High Fantasy, and 2 more in the 6th Fabula Ultima bonus supplement. First is Arcane Echoes, in which when you pass a check to fill or erase 1 or more portions of a clock, if the domain of 1 or more Arcana you have bound can be applied to the clock, you may fill or erase an additional section of a clock, letting you solve or delay a narrative situation faster or longer. Useful, but only in the narrative sense. Next there's Revelation, which lets you make contact with a unique Arcanum and bind it to your soul. This is where you get to finally create your own custom Arcanum that nobody can have until you die. If there's another Arcanist in the party, it would be quite a narrative beat for them to now get to inherit this unique Arcanum after the passing of your character in a heroic deed. Also, for once per scene, you can spend 2 Fabula points and an action to trigger a merged Arcanum's dismiss effect without actually dismissing them, which can be quite potent considering the power of some of the Arcana. In High Fantasy, you can find the Grand Summoning, which also requires your character to be level 30 or higher. Holy shit, this is long, but to summarize it, by spending a Fabula point and half of your current hit points, you can summon a full manifestation of an Arcanum, creating an extremely powerful allied creature on your side. You can now finally, actually, summon something out for real. And for the 2 from the 6th Fabula Ultima bonus supplement, there's Arcane Sacrifice, which also lets Guardian to get this heroic skill if it is mastered too, but you will still need at least bind and summon for this to work, because for once per scene, when you or any of your allies you can see get reduced to 0 health, if you are merged with an Arcanum, it is dismissed immediately and you are instead reduced to 0 health, saving you or your allies in the process. You also cannot summon said Arcanum until the scene has ended. It's a powerful skill in keeping your party alive at the worst hour. Then there's a Futa Mastery, which is more a symbolist thing as it requires the symbolism skill, and that's a whole cans of worms, so I will leave it right there. As you can see, some heroic skills require things from other classes too. You can sorta check them out to figure out what kind of classes you want to build towards to. And that's about it on the Arcanist, summoner that can project their soul outwards to grant power to themselves or their allies, and then dismiss it for a powerful burst of energy. If anyone is asking on Arcanist heroic skills in Natural Fantasy Atlas, it's currently only in Italian so I can't read it. When the English version is out, I might say something about it in future video, but I most likely won't release a new version of this video because, just look at the length. Anyway, that's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe and click that notification bell button. If you want to see the videos early as well as further support my channel, you can join in my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.